So, I have read Children of Dune, but it's been a while since I've read it. So this video is not technically an official review, it's just my thoughts on Children of Dune, even though that technically is a review. But it's not going to be like my other book reviews where I go a bit more in depth and I tell you all the things I really loved and liked and certain lines and passages, because at the end of the day, I don't remember much of Children of Dune, and my relationship with Children of Dune is a bit... It's kind of weird. It's kind of similar to how I felt with the first Dune book, where I read it the first time and I was like, I liked it, but there's a lot of weird things in it that hold me back from loving it. And I had to read the first Dune book a second time to truly understand it, and I was like, oh, I get it now. It works. And then obviously reading Dune Messiah straight after the second reread, I was like, oh, the story of Paul Atreides makes sense. And I love it, and it's so rich, and I think on a third read-through of the first book and on a second reread of Dune Messiah, I'd find even more things more compelling. And the thing that I loved about those first two Dune books was the story of Paul Atreides, this young boy who was destined to become the Duke of House Atreides, but due to the assault and trap laid by House Harkonnen, I was about to do it again, God damn it, he loses everything and is forced into the desert with his mother, and they end up joining the Fremen, and he becomes the Messiah, Muad'Dib, and ultimately ends that first book becoming Emperor of the known universe. And Dune Messiah shows us the horrors that he unleashes as Emperor. He allows the Fremen to commit their jihad, he allows billions of people to die across the universe. I see a holy war spreading across the universe like unquenchable fire, a warrior religion that waves the Atreides banner in my father's name, fanatical legions worshipping at the shrine of my father's skull, a war in my name! Everyone shouting my name! God, I cannot wait for Timothée Chalamet to get to the juicy stuff in Dune Part 2 and in Dune Messiah. But Paul's character arc in Dune Messiah is just incredibly hard-hitting and tragic. He loses the love of his life in Chani. Simon Vance, the narrator of the Dune audiobook, says Chani, but the movie says Chani, so I don't know. I flip-flop back and forth. God damn it, Denis Nerve, you have confused my pronunciation of a lot of the Dune lore. But he loses the love of his life in Chani, whatever. And he leaves his kids in the care of his sister Elia. But he is now blind and goes into the desert to die like a Fremen. And it's a very tragic and sad ending, and it's very hard-hitting. You're just like, oh wow. The juxtaposition of Paul Atreides at the beginning of the first Dune book to the end of Dune Messiah is like night and day. It is so hard-hitting, and I can't wait to see that play out on film one day. And the thing with Children of Dune is that it is both a sequel to Dune Messiah in terms of we do see Paul Atreides once again, but he is now old and is now known as the Preacher. And we see returning characters like Elia and Lady Jessica and the Princess Irulan, and it's all interesting, but just at the end of the day, I found the narrative of Children of Dune just not to be very compelling. I don't know if that's because I just didn't connect with Leto and Ghanima, but like, to me, Frank Herbert's writing style in the book 2 just went a bit too crazy and wild. It was very psychedelic. It was a lot of ideas pushed on paper, but he was also just like spouting off a lot of high concept philosophy and was just like really pontificating a lot of the time, I found, in a lot of his prose, and I was kind of like, I'm not really vibing with this one. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some fantastic stuff in the prose. I love, for example, when Leto is fused with that husk thing that turns him into the Worm Man in God Emperor of Dune. When he bonds with that and he's just like, my skin is not my own. I found that to be really interesting. And then obviously the more psychedelic stuff with Leto and unlocking his ability, his prescience ability, and how he is not necessarily the new Kwisatz Haderach, but he is now viewing the golden path that lies ahead, the path that Paul Atreides did not want to walk on and was too cowardly to walk on. It was very interesting, and I think the culmination and climax of the book is very good. It's just that in terms of Leto and Ganima's story, it's fine. Like, there's the bit where, like, they fake Leto's death. Leto, like, mind wipes Ghanima, and it's just like, I died by those, like, Space Panther things. And she's just like, oh yeah, my brother died by the Space Panther things. And it's very much the idea that it's the children of House Atreides trying to overcome the faction of House Carino that wants to overthrow the Atreides, because obviously Princess Irulan wants to protect Leto and Ghanima because she loved Paul and she vowed that she will protect the children. But obviously her sister, is her sister or her brother? One of the members of House Carino wants to take back the Lion Throne and become Padishah of the known universe once again. They want to bring House Carino back to its former glory after Paul Atreides tore them down and humiliated them. And it's fine, but it's not really as engaging or as intriguing as, say, something like the first Dune novel or a Game of Thrones. Like, the politics in Children of Dune, the whole scheming and machination stuff is fine, but I don't feel much of a tension and a setup to the payoff. And speaking of Princess Irulan, I thought her character was interesting, but I wanted more, because her revelation at the end of Dune Messiah that she loved Paul Atreides the whole time and will defend and protect these children was cool, and I liked seeing her interaction with, say, Ghanima in Children of Dune. It's just that I wanted a bit more. She kind of still feels like a secondary side character pushed into the background, and it's like, nah, give Irulan some stuff. Irulan's pretty cool. But one of the more interesting things I found with Children of Dune was the way they handled the character of Aaliyah, and specifically her relationship with Lady Jessica, because Lady Jessica is not in Dune Messiah. She went back to Caladan because she cannot bear to be on Arrakis because of the death of Duke Leto. And she finally returns after all these years, after her son has disappeared into the desert and is probably dead, to basically guide Leto and Ghanima and help them rule Arrakis as they age. And then obviously she's also come back to deal with Aaliyah, because Aaliyah is now being possessed by the Baron Harkonnen and has become Abomination. Again, the prose and Simon Vance's narration of said prose by Frank Herbert is great. Like, I love the repetition of Abomination. Abomination. And I ultimately found Aaliyah's descent into madness and her essentially killing herself to be very tragic and sad. Aaliyah is still one of my favorite characters in the whole Dune trilogy because she is fantastic. She is this kid in the first book. She's this toddler who talks and thinks like an adult. And in Messiah, she's very conflicted because she wants to be there for her brother. She's almost filling the Lady Jessica role, but she's also still a young girl and falls in love with the Gola Hate. And by the end of Dune Messiah, she is given regency to rule Arrakis, and she's been doing so ever since. And now that Lady Jessica has returned back to Arrakis and is assuming co-regency or something, she basically kind of falls apart in a way. Her mother is not showing her the love that she wants and needs, and so she basically falls into madness. She becomes possessed by the Baron Harkonnen, the Abomination, and it's a really tragic end to her story. Though I will say, I did find the melodrama between Hate and, is it Farouk? She basically has like an affair with another man, and like, that's fine. Like, it was kind of like teenage angst drama, and like, I didn't necessarily need it. But it was interesting in a way, and the thing that I found fascinating with the Dune books, I mean, spoilers, kind of minor spoilers, major spoilers for, like, the books going forwards, is that they essentially revolve around Duncan, Idaho. Now, I have not read these books, I just know this because I'm very curious and I love, like, looking into the lore and spoilers of things. And by the time you get to the last book, which is Chapter House, or is it Heretics? It's basically the story of Duncan, Idaho being cloned like through thousands and thousands of millennia. Another chapter that I do think really stuck out to me was the one that was told through the perspective of the preacher, where we see the preacher for the first time, and there's this line in the prose where it's like, some people claim him to be the old Emperor Paul Atreides, or something like that. Muad'Dib, and it's very interesting. I was there just like, this is really cool. And then obviously you hear the preacher talk, and from what I remember, he denounces the ways of Muad'Dib, I think. I think it's the idea that Paul Atreides, now that he is older and wiser and has lost all of his prescience and senses, now sort of comes to terms with the tragedy he has caused, and he basically denounces his old ways. I found all that stuff to be fascinating, and the way we leave Paul Atreides at the end of Children of Dune, where he is killed, essentially left to die in martyrdom, and breaking Stilgar's sort of realization that Muad'Dib was just a man, was fascinating. It's just that the rest of the book surrounding that is kind of, I don't know, this feels like it's an unnecessary addition, even though from what people say about Children of Dune, this is the beginning of a new chapter in the Dune series, and you can definitely tell that because, like, I watched Quinn's Ideas video on God Emperor, at least half of it, just because I kind of had to pause halfway just being like, wait, what is going on? This is so just like batshit insane. He's now like a worm man and he's like married his sister. Wait, what? Like the weird incestuous themes in Children of Dune 2, like that whole sequence where like Leto and Ganima are using their prescient powers and they are channeling their mother and father, Paul and Cheney, and like they're communicating and you can just feel the presence and spirits of Paul and Cheney kind of like manifesting through the kids and they're going all like incestuous and stuff. It's really weird. I think that was one of the many things that started to turn me off from the Dune book series. Like I love those first 2 books and this one has a lot of good things in it, but it just starts getting too weird, too incestuous, too psychedelic, and I'm like, Frank Herbert was definitely taking some stuff when he wrote this. But that does not mean I think this book is bad. I think this book might need another read through from me, but that will be for a long time now because obviously I've committed to reading the Wheel of Time book series, and that's 14 books in. I'm on book 4, and yeah, that's like probably 10 more months of me reading Wheel of Time before I can finally have the chance to get back to Children of Dune, or at least the Dune trilogy, because I want to definitely reread the trilogy before watching Dune Part 2. Again, this is not a review per se, this is just my thoughts on Children of Dune. This is not my definitive thoughts, this is just my first impressions. I'd say we'll call it that, because there's a lot of good and there's a lot of great stuff in there, but there's also a lot of things that I found to either be lacking or just not really hitting the way it should be hitting for me. But those are just my thoughts. What do you think of Children of Dune? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. And until we meet again, see you guys next time.